This is a true life story. Sydney, Australia. A suburban home. A teenage girl, Renae Marsden, moves through her life with quiet sincerity. She's the kind of person friends lean on, warm, honest, eager to help. Born in 1992, raised by her mother Teresa and later embraced by Mark, her stepfather, Renae felt deeply tied to her family. She wasn't just the eldest child. She was part of the glue that held relationships together. As she matured, she kept close to home, working, helping her siblings, always anchoring her life around family. She had plans, dreams, to someday move in her own place, maybe share a flat with her cousin. But for now, her heart remained in her childhood world. In high school, Renae met Camila Zeidan. They attended the same Catholic school. They grew close, confidants. Camila seemed caring, present, and always ready with emotional support. Renae welcomed the friendship. Over time, Camila introduced Renae to someone named Braden Spiteri, someone who would come to dominate her life. From late 2011 onward, Renae began telling her mother about Braden, that he was in prison, that he and Renae communicated by text, that Camila had arranged contact and legal support. Renae claimed Camila had even contacted Braden's lawyer to secure a special phone so he could text from behind bars. Renae said the two shared secrets about Camila, used codes to discuss her, and confided in each other about arguments and difficulties. She believed the prison rules prevented calls, so conversation was limited to written messages. But behind that narrative lay inconsistencies. Outside observers, friends, family, saw signs of control and suppression in Renae's behavior. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Her grades suffered. There were stories of Camila pushing her, physically grabbing her, threatening her, and punishing her when she resisted. Even at school, Renae is reported to have complained that Camila followed her to classes, appeared at her workplace unannounced, and monitored her outings. In the early years, Camila's behavior was easier to disguise. She presented as a supportive friend, but the patterns were there, controlling who Renae could see, dictating daily decisions, crying when Renae insisted on independence, accusing her of betrayal when she tried to step away. Inside the Marsden household, concern grew. Teresa and Mark noticed changes. Renae once overdosed and was hospitalized. She spoke of feeling mentally unstable, overwhelmed by conflicting demands. Teresa confronted Camila's family, tried to limit their contact. But Camila countered by giving Renae a new phone, ensuring messages would still flow through her channels. Despite escalating concern, the friction remained obscured. To outsiders, Camila was still a devoted friend. Renae, apologetic, kept the turmoil mostly for her own private world. By 2012, Renae had a tattoo on her chest reading "B. Spiteri," cementing in her own mind a symbolic tie to Braden, the mysterious man she believed loved her over the years. Their conversations grew intense. In some months, they exchanged thousands of texts. Renae trusted those messages. She clung to promises, plans, imagery of a future together, as if they were reality. But cracks had begun to appear. Family and friends privately questioned whether Braden existed at all. Some suspected Camila was behind the messages, fabricating an entire persona. Others urged Renae to distance herself, but she resisted, torn between loyalty, love, and fear. As that friendship and that phantom romance consumed her, Renae's world tightened around Camila's manipulation. When trust becomes control and love becomes calculation, how do you sense you're already in too deep? Welcome to True Crime Tapes, where we bring you the most gripping, mysterious, and heart-stopping stories from the world of true crime. If you're fascinated by the unknown and want to uncover the secrets that the world tries to hide, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a chilling story. And for those of you already part of our community, welcome back. We're glad to have you with us. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts and theories, because we love hearing from you. True Crime Tapes. The truth is always stranger than fiction. After the early days of friendship, Renae Marsden began to notice changes. Camila Zeidan's presence, once a comfort, became a constant force pressing on her. Over time, Camila's influence extended beyond emotional appeals. It found its way into Renee's everyday decisions, movements, and even her sense of reality. Camila followed Renae to a different school, insisting they stay connected. She showed up unannounced at places Renae went, the gym, the campus, her shifts at work, often offering excuses for why she was there. Just wanted to see you. I thought you might need company. I was near. But each time, Renae felt the weight of expectation. Every missed message, every delayed answer, was met with Camila's disappointment or anger. As this pressure built, Renae attempted multiple times to reclaim space. She kept some plans secret. She sometimes didn't answer messages until later. Still, Camila noticed and reacted. Guilt messages flooded Renee's phone. Camila would suggest that Renae was being disloyal or that she was neglecting their friendship. Sometimes she threatened to cut off contact forever, to disappear, or to let everyone else believe Renae didn't care. Then, after days of silence, she would reappear, warm, apologetic, convincing. The pattern repeated: closeness, distance, guilt, reconciliation. One documented turning point occurred in a public place. On a busy street, Camila slapped Renae across the face. It was sudden. It drew stares. But though people saw and paused, none intervened. It felt like a moment suspended, violence in light, the world looking on but stepping back. The harm was more than physical. It confirmed to Renae just how exposed she was, how isolated. At a football game some while later, things erupted again. Camila, upset over some small interaction Renae had with another person, yelled. She pointed. She tried to push and pull. It was dramatic and public. Renae stood in front of strangers as Camila loudly accused her of betrayal. The tension escalated until friends intervened or tried to calm things down. After that incident, Renae made a decisive move. She blocked Camila. She ignored her calls, snapped off contact. She moved, changed living arrangements, reducing opportunities for Camila to appear uninvited. She tried to rebuild her life. Yet, despite everything, Camila did not disappear. She went abroad for a time, giving herself and Renae space. But on her return, she brought with her a story. She had met someone in prison, Braden Spiteri, and through this new connection, she introduced Renae into a relationship conducted entirely at a distance, via text and messages. Even this relationship was under Camila's orchestration. Every text that seemed to come from Braden passed through Camila. Gifts never went directly to Renae. Phone calls never came. All communication was filtered. The illusion of intimacy, of someone waiting, of a shared future, it grew, carefully nurtured. Meanwhile, Renee's mental health began to suffer. She grew anxious when messages didn't come. She felt trapped between a life she could see, working, supporting siblings, family love, and one she believed in, messages from Braden, the plan for escape, the love she was told awaited her. She wanted to break free, but every attempt led to emotional fallout with Camila. Every time Renae pulled away, Camila would threaten abandonment, loneliness, or accuse her of forgetting their bond. Throughout this period, the evidence, as later found in the coroner's report, shows that Camila's motive included keeping Renae emotionally tied to her alone. The fictitious character, Braden Spiteri, existed to sustain that connection, to justify constant monitoring, to give Camila power, control over Renee's feelings, her choices, even her hopes. Friends and family noticed. There were warnings that Renae was withdrawing socially, that she was less open, that her vibrant personality dimmed. But it's hard to see manipulation when you're living inside it. Renae believed Camila loved her. She believed Braden loved her. She believed their plans. She believed their future. The hold that Camila had over Renae was not just emotional. It was psychological. It was control through absence and presence, through promises and punishments, through affection and threats. It grew until the burden became a weight Renae could barely carry. When every escape route leads back through the same walls, how do you know when you're truly free and when the ties are just being hidden, not released? When Camila Zeidan came back from a trip abroad, she carried more than luggage. She brought with her a story one that would reshape Renae Marsden's world. She claimed she had met someone in prison, a man named Braden Spiteri. According to Camila, Braden was serving time for a motorcycle accident in which a friend riding with him was killed, and also for other charges. She painted Braden as misunderstood, wounded, someone who needed love and who'd found something in Renae. Renae believed it. She began writing letters to Braden. The letters became texts, then late-night messages, rambling conversations, intimate declarations. He supposedly could not call because of prison restrictions. He would not video chat, but messages arrived regularly. Camila acted as the messenger. She delivered gifts, supposedly from Braden. She read out letters, even showed photos. Everything that seemed to connect Renae to Braden was controlled by Camila. Over about 18 months, the illusion grew stronger. Renae sent prepaid phones. She used her own money. She even had Braden's surname tattooed on her chest, B. Spiteri, as a permanent mark of allegiance. In those messages, Braden's words were intense. He spoke of future plans, marriage, a life together. He expressed jealousy when Renae showed interest in other men. He criticized her acquaintances. He called her his only real connection. Sometimes, according to family accounts, he demanded she not cut Camila out, that their triangular relationship was essential. Renae believed she was living between two worlds. The life she saw, her mother, her work, her future, and the life she was promised with Braden. She hoped for freedom when Braden would be released from prison. She considered marriage, honeymoon plans, the possibility of escape from the pain she felt when Braden was silent. In her internet history, there were searches for bridal dresses, photographers. She planned a future she thought was real. But there was a problem. Renae and Braden never actually met. Police found no evidence that any man called Braden Spiteri had ever existed at the prison or outside. The persona was fabricated. The photo shown to Renae was traced back to someone who had no connection with the story. The Facebook page, the messages, all controlled by Camila. Conversations said to be from Braden were traced to devices linked to Camila. When questioned in the inquest, Camila Zeidan claimed that the Braden character was something both she and Renae had agreed to create to hide a romantic relationship between the two of them. A relationship that, in Camila's account, they believed others would not accept. But the coroner found this explanation inconsistent with evidence. Renae did not seem to know Braden was fake. She engaged genuinely with the relationship. She ended her other romantic relationship because she believed her future was with Braden. She trusted what she believed was Braden's opinion. She spent months and years building an emotional bond with someone she thought existed. The messages were not just romantic fluff. They included jealousy, demands, emotional pressure. Braden would bring up Camila, defend her, suggest Renae must not abandon the connection. When Renae tried to step away or when contact was delayed, Camila as Braden would send messages expressing betrayal, hurt, often reminding Renae of love and pain. Renae, in turn, would apologize, worry, hope. She believed in the identity of Braden, in the authenticity of their bond. This relationship pulled her deeper into dependence. Her self-worth became tied to acceptance, to affirmation, to promises. Through all this, there were warning signs. Friends and family saw Renae fade. She stopped seeing people. She withdrew. She seemed infected by uncertainty when Braden went silent. Sometimes Camila blamed external factors, the prison, his lawyers, his mental health. Sometimes she claimed technical issues. But always the narrative resumed. Always the messages came back. The emotional toll rose. Renae's hope was fueled by the belief that Braden would be released. Camila reminded her of that promise. As the illusion deepened, Renae broke off her engagement with a man named Ian because she believed her true future lay with Braden. She invested emotionally, financially, mentally, and the hold of that fictional relationship became part of her identity. This was not just deception. It was a constructed world in which Renae lived, a world Camila had built and maintained, message by message, lie by lie. It was love, or what Renae believed was love, but it was entirely orchestrated. How many pieces of someone's reality can be forged before they lose sight of what is real? And how hard is it to find your way back? For years, Renae Marsden had been pulled back and forth by the emotional grip of Camila Zeidan and the fantasy life created around Braden Spiteri. Her world revolved around texts, late-night conversations, and promises of a future that never materialized. But in the middle of this storm, something new began to take shape, something real. At her workplace, Renae grew close to a colleague named Ian. Unlike the exhausting cycles with Camila and Braden, Ian's presence felt calm, steady, and safe. He didn't need constant updates about where she was or who she was with. He didn't lash out if she was slow to reply to a text. He simply respected her space. For Renae, who had grown accustomed to walking on eggshells, Ian represented something she had nearly forgotten existed: genuine, uncomplicated kindness. At first, their bond was lighthearted. Shared lunches, quick conversations at work, the kind of everyday companionship that felt refreshingly normal. But as weeks turned into months, their connection deepened. They began to see each other outside of work, dinners, movie nights, long drives. Slowly, Renae opened herself up again, letting someone new step into her carefully guarded world. Her family noticed the change. Teresa, her mother, said later that she saw Renae smiling more, looking forward to the future again. Ian treated her with respect, not the conditional, suffocating kind of affection Camila demanded, but genuine care. For once, it seemed that Renae was experiencing the beginnings of the life she deserved. And then, in early 2013, came a turning point. Ian, deeply in love, proposed marriage. A simple ring, a simple question, and Renae said yes. For those around her, it was a moment of relief and celebration. Finally, she was stepping toward a life beyond the suffocating grip of her past, beyond the false promises of Braden. But behind that acceptance lay a painful truth. Renae hadn't stopped communicating with Braden. Even while wearing Ian's ring, she continued texting, imagining, believing. Camila, still orchestrating the entire deception, ensured that the messages flowed. Braden loved her. Braden was waiting. Braden was hers. Camila even used emotional leverage, hinting that if Renae drifted too far, Braden would suffer. The trap was subtle but powerful. To the outside world, Renae was planning a future with Ian. In her private world, she was preparing for a wedding with a man she had never seen, never touched, never heard directly from. Court records later revealed her internet history filled with bridal searches, dresses, photographers, venues. Evidence of a bride preparing not for the fiancé in front of her, but for a phantom carefully spun by Camila's hands. Caught between two realities, Renae grew conflicted. At times, she was radiant with Ian, hopeful about what their life together might bring. Other times, she withdrew, burdened by the weight of the secrets she couldn't share, that her heart was still tethered to Braden. Eventually, the conflict broke her. She ended her engagement with Ian. There were no harsh words, no anger, no betrayal in the traditional sense. Just a quiet, heavy ending. To Ian, she said she needed more time for herself. To her family, she gave the same explanation. None of them knew that the real reason lay in messages typed out by Camila, sent in the voice of a man who didn't exist. For Ian, it was a devastating loss. For Renae, it was stepping deeper into the illusion. The coronial inquest later emphasized just how deeply this fantasy controlled her decisions. Renae had sacrificed a real, tangible relationship for someone who existed only in text messages and filtered words. It wasn't just about romance. It was about identity. She had built her sense of future, her hope, her emotional security around Braden. To let go of him felt like letting go of the life she thought she was destined for. But even after ending her engagement, the pressure didn't ease. Every time Renae tried to distance herself, Braden would reappear through Camila. Every silence was broken by another text. Every attempt to move forward was undercut by the reminder that she had someone waiting for her. Camila kept the illusion alive, ensuring that Renae remained trapped between loyalty to a fantasy and fear of loss. Inside her, the battle raged. The warmth of family and Ian's kindness on one side, and the powerful illusion of Braden on the other. She wanted freedom, but she also wanted the dream she had been promised for years. By the time the engagement was over, Renae wasn't just grieving the end of her relationship with Ian. She was grieving the loss of what could have been a life free from control, free from deception, free from Camila's grip. And yet, she couldn't let go. Not yet. Why do people sometimes cling harder to illusions than to the real love standing right in front of them? By mid-2013, Renae Marsden reached a breaking point. After years of control, manipulation, and the exhausting tug-of-war with Camila Zeidan, she finally decided she had to cut ties. She wrote a farewell letter, calm, measured but firm. In it, she drew a line in the sand. She wanted out. She wanted freedom. She wanted to reclaim the pieces of her life that had been swallowed by years of emotional captivity. But Camila wasn't prepared to let go. Almost immediately, the pressure resumed. Not always directly, but in subtle, unnerving ways. Fake Facebook accounts. Anonymous messages. Camila used mutual friends to pass information, to keep tabs on Renae's movements, and to remind her, without saying it outright, that she was never really free. And then came something that pushed Renae deeper into despair. The voice that had comforted her, the love that had carried her through sleepless nights, the figure she believed she would one day marry, suddenly disappeared. Braden Spiteri. For 2 years, he had been a constant presence in her life. His texts were the first thing she saw in the morning. His words of devotion guided her when she felt lost. His promises, "When I get out, we'll be together," had shaped her future. But now silence. No letters. No calls. No texts. Nothing. At first, Renae rationalized it. Maybe he was in trouble at the prison. Maybe visitation rules had changed. Maybe something had happened to his phone privileges. She replayed old messages, clung to old words, and convinced herself that it was temporary. But days stretched into weeks. The silence grew unbearable. Her anxiety mounted. She reached out to Camila for answers. But Camila, the gatekeeper of all things Braden, offered only vague responses. Delays. Excuses. Stories that didn't quite add up. By early August, Renae could no longer take it. She needed to know the truth. On August 5, 2013, she picked up the phone and called the prison where Braden was supposedly serving his sentence. Her heart raced as she waited for someone to answer. When the officer on the other end finally spoke, Renae asked the question that had haunted her for days. "Is there an inmate named Braden Spiteri?" The answer was blunt, cold, final. "No, there is no inmate here by that name. There has never been anyone by that name." In an instant, 2 years of her life collapsed. Every late-night text, every plan for a wedding, every dream she had nurtured, every tear shed, every argument fought, every time she had chosen Braden over real opportunities for love and happiness, all of it shattered into nothing. The realization was devastating. She hadn't just lost a relationship. She had lost herself. The man she believed had loved her never existed. The letters, the Facebook posts, the gifts, all of it had been a fabrication. And behind that fabrication was not a man in prison, but Camila Zeidan, the same friend who had once sworn loyalty, who had once slapped her in the middle of the street, who had once begged her not to leave. That day marked a devastating turning point. For Renae, there was no more illusion left to cling to. She had seen the truth with her own eyes, heard it with her own ears. What would you do if you discovered that the person you loved, the person who defined your future, never existed at all? By August 2013, Renae Marsden was only 20 years old. She had spent 6 years locked in a cycle of control, a cycle of manipulation so elaborate it blurred the lines between reality and illusion. The friendship with Camila had morphed into something that consumed her world, and the imaginary love with Braden Spiteri had convinced her to sacrifice relationships, dreams, and even her own sense of self. But in the days leading up to her death, cracks began to appear. Renae had started to see through the illusion. Friends recalled her moments of doubt, times when she questioned whether Braden was truly who he claimed to be. Her trust, once unwavering, had begun to shift into suspicion. On August 6, 2013, Renae spent the day at home with her family. To those around her, nothing seemed unusual. She laughed with her siblings, shared small conversations, and appeared to carry on with her usual routine. But beneath the surface, something inside her was unraveling. Throughout that day, she exchanged messages with Camila. The tone was tense, even sharp. Renae was no longer the compliant friend, no longer the quiet believer in Camila's story. She was angry, she was hurt, and she was beginning to accept the truth she had denied for so long. At 4 p.m., Renae sent one final message to Camila. Just 6 words. I know Braden doesn't exist. Those words marked the end of years of deception, the moment she finally stripped away the illusion Camila had built. But it was also a declaration filled with unbearable weight, the realization that the love she had clung to, the future she had imagined, had never been real. What happened next took only minutes. At 4:04 p.m., Renae walked in her bathroom. She carried with her a hidden stash of medication. No note, no goodbye, just the quiet decision to end the pain she had endured for years. Within moments, she swallowed the pills. Alone, it wasn't long before her mother, Teresa, discovered her. The shock was instant, the horror indescribable. Teresa called emergency services. Paramedics rushed to the scene. They worked frantically, trying everything to revive her daughter. But it was too late. Renae Marsden was gone, just 20 years old. Her life ended not by her own weakness, but by years of manipulation that had stripped away her hope. Her family was left shattered, her friends devastated, and the question echoed through every conversation that followed. Had this been a choice, or had it been the inevitable outcome of psychological abuse that pushed her beyond the edge? Was Renae's death simply a personal tragedy, or the result of a calculated pattern of control and emotional abuse? When paramedics declared Renae Marsden dead on August 6, 2013, her family was thrust into a nightmare. Shock and grief gave way to confusion. Why? How could this vibrant, kind young woman suddenly be gone? What had pushed her to such a devastating decision? The police began by combing through her phone, her laptop, and her social media accounts. At first, what they found seemed like the evidence of a tragic love story gone wrong. Hundreds of messages exchanged between Renae and Braden Spiteri, the man she had believed was her secret fiancé. Their conversations stretched across years. Declarations of love, plans for the future, wedding preparations. To anyone glancing quickly, it might have looked like the life of a young woman devoted to a man waiting for her on the outside. But as investigators dug deeper, the story began to unravel. Every message Renae ever received from Braden could be traced back, not to a prison, not to another phone belonging to a man, but to one person, Camila Zeidan. It was staggering. The Facebook page for Braden, created by Camila. The messages from supposed guards or fellow inmates who vouched for him, written by Camila. The fabricated family members who reassured Renae of Braden's existence, all Camila. For years, Camila had orchestrated an elaborate web of lies, feeding Renae a fantasy that consumed her every thought. Investigators discovered that she had gone so far as to use software to disguise her voice, holding phone conversations where she pretended to be Braden. She had written scripts to keep the stories consistent, maintaining the illusion with military precision. And through it all, she never broke character. Not once. The scale of the deception was overwhelming. Detectives counted thousands of messages, calls, and posts. The sheer effort Camila had invested wasn't a moment of weakness or a fleeting prank. It was sustained, deliberate, and designed to keep Renae under her control. As police pieced the evidence together, a chilling picture emerged. Renae's death had not come from nowhere. It was the tragic culmination of years of psychological manipulation. Every time Renae pulled away, Camila invented new ways to draw her back in. More lies, more promises, more emotional hooks. By the end, Renee's reality was so entangled in Camila's fiction that she could no longer tell truth from fabrication. But here was the problem. As clear as the manipulation was, Australian law had never dealt with a case like this before. There was no catfishing offense on the books. No law that directly criminalized sustained deception and coercive control when it didn't involve stolen money or physical violence. Police were left grappling with questions. Could lies alone be considered crime? Could psychological abuse, words on a screen, voices on the phone, be treated as seriously as physical harm? Or was Camila's deception something the legal system wasn't yet equipped to punish? For Renee's grieving family, the answers were unbearable. To them, this wasn't just lies. This was manipulation that had broken their daughter's spirit, stolen her hope, and driven her to her death. But in the eyes of the law, the case existed in a gray area, one where accountability remained frustratingly out of reach. When someone's lies are so powerful they can destroy another person's will to live, should the law treat those words as a crime? Or are they still just words? Renae Marsden's story is not just a tragedy. It is a mirror, reflecting the dangers of love, trust, and the unseen power of manipulation in the digital age. She was young. She was bright. She wanted what so many of us want: to be loved, to be chosen, to believe in the promise of a future with someone who truly cared. But what she found instead was a carefully crafted illusion, a trap, a story written by another person's hands, until her own sense of reality was torn apart. Her final words, "I know Braden doesn't exist," echo with heartbreaking clarity. They weren't just words of realization. They were words of devastation. For years, Renae had invested her heart, her dreams, her identity into a person who had never lived. And behind that illusion stood someone she once called a friend. The aftermath left scars not just on her family, but on her entire community. Friends wondered if they should have asked more questions, stepped in sooner. Strangers debated how such a deception could go unnoticed for so long. Lawmakers questioned why their systems hadn't recognized the danger until it was too late. But through the pain, her family chose to fight. Teresa, her mother, transformed her grief into action. She stood before cameras, not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted accountability. She carried Renee's memory into the halls of power, demanding change so no other parent would hear their child's final words in a text message before finding them gone. And change did come. New laws, new conversations, a new awareness that abuse doesn't always look like bruises. Sometimes it looks like messages, promises, and invisible chains that bind someone tighter than any rope ever could. Yet Renee's story also leaves us with questions that laws alone cannot answer. Why do we so often ignore the quiet cries for help? Why is emotional abuse dismissed as not serious enough until it claims a life? And why, in a world filled with connection, do so many still fall victim to loneliness and illusions? Her story is a warning that the search for love, when met with manipulation, can become deadly, that the trust we place in others can be weaponized, and that silence from bystanders, friends, and even the law can be as destructive as the abuse itself. But it is also a call to action, to look closer at those we care about, to listen when they speak of relationships that don't add up, to believe them when they say they feel trapped, even if the cage isn't visible, to fight for laws that recognize that words can wound and lies can kill. Renae Marsden's life was cut short, but her story lives on, in legislation, in awareness campaigns, in the countless families who saw themselves reflected in her pain. She is remembered not just as a victim, but as the spark that forced a nation to recognize what had been ignored for too long. As we close her story, one truth remains. Renee's legacy is not only in the life she lost, but in the lives that may now be saved. When you hear Renee's story, do you see it as just a tragedy of one young woman, or as a wake-up call to all of us to recognize the silent dangers of control, manipulation, and deception before it's too late? This is a true life story. If you found Renee's story as powerful and important as we did, please subscribe to the channel. Help us share these stories, raise awareness, and keep these conversations alive, because remembering them might just save someone else's life.